everyone. We really hope you enjoyed this episode. So, if you're watching on YouTube, if you could please like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, or if you're listening on Spotify, you can always follow us there. Every like and share and subscribe can help our channel to be seen by many more Stargate fans. So, we really appreciate it. And then we also have all of our socials listed up on the screen right now if you wish to follow us there. Okay, thank you, and I hope you enjoy. Bye. And to all the Stargate fans out there, we would love to hear from you and chat with you on our show. So if you're interested in doing that, please reach out to us via any of our social media platforms or email.
I thought it would be really cool to talk about things that either had seemed insignificant or not overly significant, but that had a greater impact than we kind of expected, or things that seemed really significant at the time or that we thought would have more significance perhaps as the show went on, but kind of didn't. And so things that broke our expectation in that regard.
Yeah.
So I came up with one of each. I'm not sure what you came up with, but I think we can kind of reveal them to each other.
I think you'll come up with better ones than I did.
Maybe not. Wait. Because it was actually really tough. Because when I thought of it, I was like, oh, this is, there's so many things in Stargate where I would feel this way. But then when I actually started thinking about it, it was kind of difficult to actually, kind of put something on paper and figure out what it is. But I wrote two down. Maybe I'll start with the first one, which is the first thing that came into my mind when I thought of things that kind of, could have been insignificant, but ended up having a big impact. And that is Sha're's pregnancy. And I think I've mentioned this before as something I thought was a little bit more impactful than I expected. And that's because in the show, at least when I kind of first watched it, it's really brought on. I thought it was kind of brought on in a way where, they were just kind of giving some way that Daniel could have this communication again with Sha're without really it bringing her back fully, that he could kind of get a little hint of interacting with her because the Goa'uld is suppressed. And then, it gave this sort of storyline then where she was there, but then he lost her again. And then it kind of reignited his drive to basically be part of SG-1 and to keep looking for her, right? So it was kind of, it almost seemed like more of an emotional impact than necessarily something that would have such a story. However, I was very surprised then when in Forever and a Day, they brought in this concept of the Harcesis and it being this sort of chosen child that had all the knowledge of the Goa'uld, which of course is already a huge plot line, and it kind of helped Daniel be, keep him having a motivation for continuing even after he could no longer look for Sha're as his main one. But it ended up being significantly more impactful because it led to us meeting Oma and learning about the ancients and bringing in the whole concept of ascension. So I kind of look at it as this sort of domino effect of or butterfly effect of this one little thing had such an impact. So that's kind of the first thing I thought of. And I don't know.
That's a really good one. And it's really, I like how you explained it all, because as you're explaining it, I'm just like, oh yeah, that brought up that and that brought up that. I had forgotten. And so that's why it was kind of difficult for me to think up my own, just because if you think about it, I have, especially with SG-1, all these shows, it's really only the second time through I've watched it, so it hasn't fully stuck in my mind every little thing. Plus my memory is just crap. But so it was hard for me to kind of think back about how something affected a storyline and in what order, unless I were to have went back and rewatched it. So I think what you mentioned with the pregnancy, you're so right, because I don't think, if I'm trying to remember how I felt during the time of when you first find out that she's pregnant, I didn't really think too much of it, I didn't expect it. That probably would be one that if I would have actually thought of it, that I wouldn't have expected it to be as big of a storyline, like you were saying, due to all of the different things that then happens, throughout. So that's a really good one. I agree. But Anywho, should I mention one that I feel like I don't know. I don't feel like I did well with choosing here. Like I was trying to think of like stuff that I expected to be more. Maybe I've went about this wrong, so apologies if I did. I was trying to think of things that I felt would have been more in the storyline than they actually were.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so like I was trying to think of something with Stargate Atlantis because I was figuring like maybe that's more fresh in my memory since you know, I had just finished the 5th season not that long ago. And so I guess like what kind of came to mind was like episodes that were slightly different, that maybe had like something happening in it that then didn't fully continue. So like for example, like the episode Whispers, where it's like that's where you have like the what do you call it, the Aratus hybrids, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like, yes, I know that technically like the hybrid stuff is mentioned and certain things are developed in a sense, but I felt like with that particular creature, if you want to call it, I felt like I had expected that specific hybrid, because that was more of the zombie thing, right? Am I, unless I'm getting this all backwards. I think those were the zombie like
Mm-hmm.
things, the hybrid. And you don't ever actually see that form of it again, if that makes sense.
True.
Like you do see like other things develop through this, I think. So in that sense, you could argue that it's connected, but I feel like specifically certain things that were created through the Aratus bug, like you don't, like we just saw that particular zombie-like creature that one time,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe that made sense. People that know the storyline way better than me are probably going to argue that there's a reason for that and explain like why that was, but that's just what came to mind, was that like seeing that as a like watching that episode and not remembering that episode initially at all.
Mm-hmm.
I expected that to be more of a thing than it ended up being. And
That
then
makes sense.
there was an other part which kind of goes into my second one, but it's connected with this one, so I don't know if you wanted me to mention that or not.
Yeah, if it's connected, maybe mention it, because I think the one I had is so out of the
Okay, yeah.
topic. So let's continue with this since you
Yeah. So
recommended
in this
one.
same episode, this is, if I was thinking of the correct episode, hopefully, this is the one where they have the female team that they work with, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I thought that, I don't know why I thought this, but when I saw this episode, I thought that that female team would be kind of brought back into Stargate
Mm-hmm.
Atlantis, and like not necessarily all of them, but like there was one girl in particular that I recognized her face, and I've seen that she's been to Comic-Cons and stuff. And so I thought that maybe she was a character that was coming onto the show. And so for that reason of having that outside knowledge of knowing that she was at Comic-Cons, I was just like, oh, she's a new character that's being introduced. Like she's coming in this all-female team, but they're going to somehow have her join Atlantis. That's what I was initially thinking. Like I thought she was somehow coming onto the show. And I don't know, maybe if I recognize her just because like she maybe then ends up being in the universe. I don't know. Like I haven't gotten it. I've only watched 2 episodes of Universe, or if it's just that she's just known from being on that one episode of Atlantis. But and I forget her name, but like I'm pretty sure she's one of the ones that are at the Star Fury con that's happening this month in
Oh.
London. And so because of that, like I thought like, oh, she must be like more of a main role. So when I got to this episode where that team comes on and I saw her, I was expecting there to be more storylines that involved that all-female team, because they made it like a thing, you know, like I felt like they made it like a thing that then just didn't go anywhere. Like I know it made sense for the episode, but then I just felt like, you know how sometimes you'll be introduced to characters and then they'll have them later come on in other episodes and then eventually kind of have more of like a regular like comeback kind of role where they're helping every now and then. So that's what I'd expected with that. Those are the only things I could kind of think up. I'm sure there's probably better ones I could have thought up, but yeah, I was just all kind of connected with that one episode.
Yeah, no, that's actually such a good thought, because I mean, it didn't like occur to me like that, right, that they don't come back, but I do remember thinking in that episode specifically about the team, like, oh, that it's interesting that they're introducing this, and that it seemed like they were setting up, I think, like the kind of, maybe it's the same one you're thinking of that was at Comic-Con, but it was kind of the one that was sort of like the leader of that team, you
Yeah.
know? And it was like they almost were kind of setting her up to be more of like a character rather
Yeah,
than
I
just,
think it was the leader of the team. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And so, and I remember like thinking, oh, her character's really cool. Like it would be kind of neat to have her on Atlantis. And so, I mean, maybe that's something where they did think in a 6th season that she could be a
Yeah.
bigger part of the show. I don't know. Because I mean, unfortunately, it was canceled so shortly after that. But yeah, I would completely agree with. I mean, I also agree with the hybrids. I think overall I felt like there were so many aspects of the hybrids that I think were kind of brought up and not really abandoned, but it didn't like go as far as I would have expected.
Yeah.
Especially considering how persistent some enemies like in earlier Atlantis or SG-1 were. I mean, if you think like the Anubis warriors, I mean, they were pretty persistent.
Yeah.
They actually had to develop a certain technology in order to get through them, and then even then, like it was very, you know, complicated. And so I feel like the hybrids, they weren't really actually present as much as I expected, considering in a way how much actual impact they probably had, if that makes sense. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Like you worded it in a better way because that's kind of like what I meant, you know, like is exactly that thought. And I just looked up who the actress was because she's at the Ascension thing. Her name's I don't know how to pronounce it. Nicole DeBoer. It's DE and then a space and then BOER. I don't know how to pronounce that.
Okay, yeah.
And she's a guest at the Ascension Con. So I mean, maybe she's has other more of a role in things on universe or something. I don't know. Because I thought usually when they have people at like the cons, don't they usually have more of a role than just like the one episode?
Yeah, and maybe she was in universe. That would be actually kind of interesting. I want to check that.
Oh, I guess she was also in the final season of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Maybe
okay.
that's why she's at the Ascension thing. I just thought it was all Stargate people though. But maybe because she was in Atlantis, they figured they could join her in with that group.
Right. Because she's
But
in it. Yeah, that makes sense. Because actually there's quite a lot of, I think, like Star Trek actors and such that were also in Stargate, but maybe didn't have like huge roles, but were there, I mean, a bit.
yeah.
I mean, of course there's ones like Woolsey where I think, I mean, because he was in Star Trek, right? Also.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, but he had ended up having a much larger role. But then I think there was also another one who was the politician who was also in Star Trek, but then had some
Oh, okay.
John Delancey. Maybe the name is wrong, but the one, I can't remember the character's name. I mean, if you think, I feel like it's one of those situations where I would have expected maybe at least 2 or 3 more episodes if there were, say, another season or something, or even that, yeah, this is some kind of recurring.
Yeah. That exactly. Yeah, that's why I chose that one, is I would have expected it to have a few episodes more of it. So, yeah. So what was yours?
So my thing that I thought would have a bigger impact, and it's interesting because I I would be curious if you kind of agree or disagree about the impact, was the Nox. I'm going way back. So
Ah,
you're at the end of season 5. I'm going way back to season 1 of SG1, and it's the Nox. And that's because I think they're truly one of the most intriguing advanced races that they met, right? In addition to like the Asgard, the ancients. So it is one of the more intriguing races that they met. And they do appear a couple times in the earlier seasons, like when they're dealing with the Talon, and then again when they're dealing with Scar's trial, and when they finally extract
yeah.
him. But I feel like when you consider how much the Tok'ra kind of came back and how much the Asgard were involved, I feel like, and then how much the ancients actually comprise such a huge part of the storyline later on. I was very, very surprised when I really think about it that the Nox kind of almost all but disappeared by the end.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I think it because like I've always really liked the Nox. I never realized that they actually weren't in it all that much, and it didn't really, you're right, it didn't really cause anything else. They just kind of vanished. Like I think after there was that trial, right? That
Mm-hmm.
everyone just kind of vanished. I mean, I guess part of it could be you could argue that maybe the Nox chose to vanish
Yeah,
from
yeah.
being, because it's like they weren't um a community of whatever they are that wanted there to be like a war, or violence. Like they were always very set on keeping things like kind of neutral, I think, right? If I'm
Mm-hmm.
remembering correctly. Um but yeah, they're just so cool. And I feel like so many people will remember the Knox that it is very, very surprising that there wasn't more of an impact there. And I kind of wonder if it has anything to do with the fact that that was from the beginning seasons, right? Like, how
Yes,
early
yeah.
on was that?
They were, I mean, it's weird because I don't realize it, but they were introduced in season 1,
Oh, wow.
like
So
right
maybe
away
it
from
has.
season
Yeah, I'd be curious if the writers were to have introduced them later on, if there would have been more of a storyline there. Because, like, if you think about it, I kind of feel like things that stuck, with the exception of the Goa'uld,
1. Mm-hmm.
um, things that stuck in terms of other races of beings, um, tended to be things that were from a little bit near the midpoint, I think, of Stargate SG1 and later,
Mm-hmm.
potentially. It wasn't usually, if I'm remembering correctly, it wasn't usually stuff that happened in the very, very beginning.
Yeah. Well, especially not season 1. I mean, I know in season 2, they already start with the Tok'ra right away in
Oh,
season 2.
do they? Okay. I
Um,
didn't realize it
but
was that early on. Yeah.
but I think in season 1, and also the Tok'ra is another kind of Goa'uld, so it's actually not really something necessarily
True.
new.
Yeah.
Um, and I think the Nox specifically, like it probably was an episode where they kind of, it was there. It's like they were kind of still doing these like, quote unquote alien of the week episode where they go to different
Yeah.
places, see something new. And it probably wasn't ever thought of that would be something, sustaining. But it's really interesting because I feel the same about the Tolan. Like I always feel like they were just killed off way too early. And I think it's really unfortunate because I think, especially like considering the Knox and some of their philosophies and the way that they think and how they address war and the morals and ethics could have been so interesting to explore, as the series went on.
Yeah.
So I really feel like it's a situation where, yeah, maybe you're right. If they were introduced in season 4 or 5, I mean, maybe it could have been a little bit more um
Yeah.
impactful. Because if you think about it, it is this like, I know the Tok'ra were technically introduced in season 2, and that was kind of a part of a way that Sam's dad was brought into the show, I think.
Yeah.
He was using the
Yeah.
Tok'ra. But in terms of them really communicating with SG1, just like I think also with the ancients, this more happened after, as you said, season 3, 4, 5.
Yeah.
So it could have been a way of thinking, but I also could have seen where you could have really brought back the Nox later on, and their absence wouldn't have really been such a problem because, as you said, they're disappearing. You know, they kind of keep to themselves, you know, and it's actually part of their situation. But I mean, imagine when the Ori came, and there's this whole moral, ethical dilemma, bringing back the Nox, you know.
Oh, yeah. That would have been really cool. I wish they would have brought back the Nox. So it's like, yeah, I think like with SG1, if they would have brought back the Nox later on, I think that would have been perfect. I think, like you says, they could have made sense of it because it was left in kind of a questionable way. It wasn't like anything specifically happened that caused them to disappear, really. So like, oh, yeah, that would have been cool. I think that would have been perfect. It's a shame they didn't think to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, that's when I think it's funny because I really wonder how I would have felt actually watching it at
Yeah.
the time, if I would have thought, oh, they will come back, or if it's more something that I kind of think of because I've seen everything, and then when I watch it having seen everything, I go, why did the Nox come back so much? I mean, why are they really, you know, gone after like season 3?
I think like, yeah. Yeah, I think part of it too is like, I think how I viewed it at the time as well was it was common for them to have episodes where it's like they meet a new race of beings and they go to a different planet and they get accustomed with the culture and something happens and then they're done and then they go on to the next thing. And so it kind of seemed like a slight pattern there that I think in the beginning I wasn't thinking much of it. Like it made sense. Like I didn't really think like that I didn't really think about it, to be honest, if they were going to appear or reappear. Like if they were going to, I mean, disappear or reappear. But then thinking back about it, I had forgotten that they were in so little because I just really liked the Nox, and that's always stuck out to my mind, which I think is saying a lot because like I don't, like I've said, like it isn't like I've rewatched Stargate a million times. It's only been my second watch through. And so like for me, like it's like I tend to be in the moment when I watch things, so I don't always hold on to everything that's happening. And so for me to remember that, there was clearly something that must have stood out to me about them that caused me to really like them and then think in my mind that they were around more.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, I think I've noticed something that a lot of the earlier, at least first few season episodes, I think because they have more room to do it, since there's not so much world building that's really been established, they have a lot more room to kind of approach the moral, ethical sort of situations. It could also be part of that time that the concept of like ethnocentricity and things were maybe more prominent in like anthropology discussions. And so maybe that's why it was brought up more in the show, and there were more episodes where they visit someone, and part of the issue of what they're visiting is not just dealing with something morally that could be questionable, but also questioning whether their feelings of the morality were questionable or not. You know what I mean? Like maybe what they're doing is not right for you, but it's right for them. And I think that's something that was really prominent in anthropology at the time, this kind of thinking. And so I feel like as it went on, that maybe there was more world building and other issues, and then the sort of questioning became more into enlightenment and ancients and where are we coming from, and so it kind of shifted a little bit. But at the same time there were sometimes still this moral, ethical things, but in a different way. And I think it could have been really interesting to explore this sort of integration of something like the Nox and what that basically made a person kind of think of, but in the context of the later episodes and the different environment. It could have been really interesting. And And it also could have, I feel like now, and I mean, maybe I feel like now if a character like the Nox was brought on a show that was totally neutral, they would actually be perceived as bad guys.
You think?
Mm-hmm. Yes, because a lot of discussion is like neutrality doing nothing is actually violence or something. And so
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
I think now if the Nox were brought on, it could have been perceived in that different way. Granted, they also had the ability to basically not really do nothing because they weren't technically neutral. And I mean, this is fresh in my mind because I just saw this episode, the one where Skara goes on trial and the Nox are there. And of course, Goa'uld's got to be Goa'ulds. And so they're not really there to have a fair trial. They're there to also try and take out all the Tolan cannons, or at least one of them or something. And so that they can't all fire at once, right? And it's interesting because the Nox that's there, Laya, she does actually hide the cannon so that they can't, do their thing. And so
that's right.
She doesn't actually do something violent, but it's not actually a neutral action. And I thought it's really interesting because Carter actually says something like, that's a pretty fine line you didn't cross there. And so it does kind of, make me think if those characters were explored more, this sort of nuance and sort of multidimensionality that could have been sort of present might have been pretty interesting, actually.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah. And that was the episode too where there was how do you pronounce it? Zipakna, right?
Yes,
That's an arrogant one. He's someone that would maybe be in figure skating.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we definitely need to do a special feature of like costumes and like which Goa'uld costumes would be figure skating costumes or vice versa, because I feel like there's a lot of fashion crossover.
Yes, but with him too, I think he's a character that I probably expected there to be a lot more of because he kind of was just, I think if I remember correctly with him, they thought he was dead. I can't remember if he came back up again later on after that episode. I think something happened with his character.
But nothing major, and actually he was he was one that, I don't know, there's some characters that just come on screen and immediately when they come on screen, you're like, oh, they're so slimy. And he does such a good job of being slimy, right?
Yeah.
That the minute you're just like, because Apophis, you don't really get a slimy vibe. You're just like, oh, Apophis. He's
just kind of ridiculous. He's really it's just you laugh. I laugh when I see him.
And I mean, okay, Ball, he's more of suave but also scheming, and you get a definitely different vibe. But Zipakna, holy crap, you get this vibe of slimy
yes, yeah, exactly. That guy's facial expressions, he doesn't even have to say anything. His facial expressions just make you want to punch him.
Yeah, it's the way he's looking during the entire trial, and he has this arrogance, and you're just, oh, you're like,
yeah. Maybe he would end up if he was an ice skater, he would end up doing backflips and stuff and acting like he's the only one that can do it.
Maybe he would do double. No, he would be very.
Maybe he'd do 5 spins or 6 spins. No quads. It's gonna be more.
Zipakna. It's but he had a pretty if I remember right, his costume was also pretty elaborate.
Yeah, we definitely got to do a segment where we do that with Goa'uld / figure skating combo.
Yeah, Zipakna, the back flipping quint jumper that wears Goa'uld outfits. No. But
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, I do think that when I think about some of these minor Goa'uld, there are quite a few where I'm a little bit sad they didn't appear more in that sense.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I know early they really wanted to keep Apophis as kind of the main one, and there were these sort of offshoots, but some of the offshoots were actually in a way a little bit more fun,
Yeah. And I mean, I was kind of surprised too, like with Ball, like, because I remember when it got to that character and you guys saying, "Oh, just wait," because like I didn't initially remember him, but I do know he seems to be like a fan favorite and everything, and people would always post about him. At that I was actually expecting him to be in more episodes than he actually was. Like, I know like his character was throughout, but I can't remember what season he came in, but like when he came into whatever season that was, I remember thinking he was going to be in more episodes, and then he wasn't until the following season, I think. So like yeah, it's interesting when you actually think back about like, I mean, although with him, like the effect of that character was more for sure, like in terms of how it affects storyline and stuff. But anyways, what I was gonna say, which is kind of off topic of that, but is as I was trying to think up like, what I was gonna choose to like mention and stuff, and I was thinking about Stargate Atlantis, one of the questions that came to my mind that I thought would be interesting to answer and to hear your answer is what if Stargate Atlantis had continued, what storyline do you think would have continued and they would have went more into it? And I don't know if you want me to answer what I think would have been brought up more, or if you want me to wait to see what you answer.
Why don't you bring yours up? Because I'm thinking two things, one that I think might and one that I would like to. So
Okay.
you bring yours up.
I think maybe what they would have potentially went more into is Teyla's son. Like going more into like something with him and what all that meant, because like Michael was so, I know Michael dies, but like he was so into, because I can't remember the full thing with all of that, right? Like her baby has some sort of special, I guess it kind of follows that same storyline from SG1 in a sense with Daniel's kid, but like even though it's not Goa'uld, but like
But it's
but
Wraith,
like
right? Because
yeah, it's
Teyla and him
yeah.
also have both of the Wraith DNA. So
Yeah, and something with that, I feel like they would have brought or could have brought more into that whole storyline, that it could have become more of like a big deal. Because I feel like they always tried to make it a big deal and then it would just get squashed.
That's so true. I think that's one of those things where, I really thought of more from SG1 for some reason because that popped in my head. But probably if you were to ask me Atlantis something specifically to Atlantis, I would probably say Teyla's child. That it felt like, I mean, in a way, not, because of course he's present, and I mean he's there even in episodes. And I really like that they integrate, like I really appreciate that they integrated that she was having the baby in a way, like like there's this episode where I think it's McKay and Shepard, right, playing with trucks in the
Yeah.
hallway, and she comes out and she has the baby, and
Yeah.
so it's kind of more of a realistic real life thing.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate that there were those kinds of things, and that they did address in the show, is she going to join Atlantis, can she come back after she has the baby, and the sort of complications that come with that. I really appreciate that was addressed and not just glossed over. But I think that, as you said, the narrative significance, I could totally see this being more delved into, especially as you said, after the Michael storyline is really concluded.
Yeah.
Because I think with the Harcesis, this was really mostly explored after Sha're passed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's kind of, when the main thing is out of the way, then you can get to that situation. And so I think the problem is Michael was the primary issue. Well, not issue, but the primary situation dealing with Teyla's child. And I think maybe that's why. And I think Michael was what? It wasn't until second half of end season that we kind of bid farewell or assumed farewell to Michael. And yeah, I think only after that could they really go into more something detailed about the actual child, maybe.
Yeah.
Presumably. So I think you're actually correct. I do think that Teyla's child would be maybe more gone into, and maybe it would bring up something just like with Daniel's child that we can't even imagine, like we couldn't think of. But
Yeah.
and it could bring something totally different. The first thing that came to my mind when you asked that question, oddly enough, is those other Asgard.
Oh, yeah.
Because they were
That would make sense.
They were introduced right kind of in that two-parter in the mid-season of literally the last season.
Yeah.
And I think I could definitely see where with some things, especially the major storyline of Michael out of the way, I could see needing some more friction. And I could definitely see these new Asgard that aren't really Asgard being a potential either like actual enemy or maybe even something more along the lines of what the Tok'ra were, that they kind of ally with them, but they're a little bit, pain in the butt. So that's kind of, I could see that.
Yeah.
I don't know
Yeah,
you.
that's a good one. I totally agree with that. I could definitely see that being like a continued storyline. That would make sense because, again, like you said, with it being so near the end of when the actual show ends, maybe that's why they didn't, you know?
Yeah, I think I am sure that I've seen not only like discussion that there was supposed to be a season 6, but I
Yeah,
know
I've
for
seen
sure
that. Yeah.
there was supposed to be a movie even after season 6 was scrubbed, and I don't know what was actually going to be addressed in the movie.
Yeah.
I still have to watch the last episode. I think I'm 2 episodes from the end, so I think I'm missing like the probably is the conclusion of whatever's going on with Todd and the Wraith. Obviously, knowing by the setup of what's going into it, this is quite clear. What I don't know is how conclusive it is. If it's something that really feels, because I feel like, especially within SG1, the ending with what happened with the Ori, it wasn't entirely resolved until the movie. And then even the movie, I also felt it resolved it to a sense where you could say, okay, but at the same time, you could have continued with the aftermath of what happened. So, and I think at least where I'm at in Atlantis, considering how many episodes there are left, obviously all of the Wraith can't be wiped out in one episode. Maybe they can neutralize a significant threat, or they can become dormant again, but again, that doesn't really neutralize the entire threat. So I think in that sense, I could definitely imagine where, this Asgard brought in, knowing that there might be another season, they definitely could be something more.
Yeah, and recently just on our TikTok, I don't know if you had seen that someone had commented saying that the actor Joe Flanagan actually had tried to like purchase the rights to be able to continue Stargate Atlantis.
Really?
And he had tried to do that, but it never panned out. Yeah.
That would have been awesome, actually.
I was just like, damn. I just love how much like passion like all of these actors have towards the show. I think it just really shows like when actors want so badly to continue those characters, it just shows like how they must have had such like an awesome experience and enjoyed, for the most part, probably everyone they worked with and the storylines and everything. It's just like, because I feel like too often now, like you hear of shows that last a certain period of time and then you hear these horror stories afterwards of like the bad environments or the toxic environments that they were in, and it's like you're your thoughts of how a show was get completely demolished because you hear of like these toxic things. And so it's like,
totally.
I feel like it's seems to be rarer when it's like there's things like Stargate where everyone's so into it for the most part and would happily go back into the role of being those characters. So yeah, I still hold out hope though that one day something happens with like the show, that somehow they manage to get more of a Stargate show going and still have some of like the previous characters somehow be a part of it. Like I still think that would be amazing.
I would love that. And it's not actually too late, because I think Doctor Who maybe ended in the late 80s or something. And this was after multiple years and kind of, I think, even cancellations in between. And then it was revived in 2005. And I mean,
Oh,
it
yeah.
was revived with different people. And I mean, obviously, at this point, just career wise, for example, like Carter would probably be more of what General Hammond was rather than being in the field work, just because realistically, all the promotions she would have had. But I
Yeah.
still think seeing something like Carter running SG1 would be just amazing, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's probably, in a way, all you would kind of need is something like that. And maybe, some of them present at times just to remind you that it's Stargate. And it would be cool.
Yeah.
It would be really cool also to like keep Atlantis as well, and
Yeah.
even bring in some characters from Atlantis, because I have to say, like, it is really sad that there's only 5 seasons of Atlantis. I
Yeah.
am finishing this and I feel, oh man, I wish there were more. Why can't there be 10? Like there is in Stargate
Yeah.
SG1.
Definitely it's interesting um watching this through for the second time in order for me, like all the way through without like stopping kind of thing in that sense, because I definitely have some things to talk about when we talk about once we start Universe, solely for that reason of the continuation of watching stuff how I feel this time around, because I've seen Universe once before, don't remember it. But like, yeah, I won't say anything now. But there's definitely stuff to talk about in terms of how things shift and change that I think then does make it that you kind of miss a bit of Atlantis not still having more seasons to go.
Oh,
But
yeah.
yeah.
I feel like something that was very useful when transitioning to Atlantis is that for a while there was SG1 and Atlantis.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it was actually in a way really cool, because that was almost some of my favorite time with the show when I was dual watching,
Yeah.
because I think somehow there is this really nice peak that both the shows hit at the same time, and how they interweave with each other. And it's just, I really loved it. And then when Atlantis continues, there's still, by this point, it's somehow more connected with SG1, because they have the ability to communicate with Earth. And so it's almost like
Yeah.
now Atlantis is taking it over, but there's actually still this remnants of SG1 there. And
Yeah.
so you don't feel as disconnected. Of course, in the beginning, Atlantis is totally cut off and totally disconnected, but you still have SG1 there. And so it's actually kind of a really cool crossover. So I'm interested to see
Yeah.
how I feel. I didn't start Universe yet. I probably will in a week or few days, as soon as I finish Atlantis. And
Yeah. That
I'm
is
very
an
interested.
interesting point to bring up about there being the good crossover of it all. Maybe that's why with Universe it was a bit trickier with certain things. Although I'm not sure when that's supposed to have taken place. So maybe that wouldn't have made sense. Anyways, but yeah, that's for a different episode. But
But yeah, that was a really cool question you came up with. Like, what what would, and I guess it's probably the same. What would I have liked to see is probably the Asgard, I guess, because I
mhm.
thought that was, I mean, it was an unexpected and weird reveal, especially knowing that it was the 5th season.
Yeah.
But it was also at the same time, I was thinking, man, I want to know more about this Asgard that are in this
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think that would have been awesome to have. Like, I wish that Atlantis had the same amount of seasons that SG1 did, but even with SG1, it's kind of like, I think because we're all such big fans of all the different characters, it's like that even still doesn't seem enough, right? So even though it was 10 seasons, it's just like, oh, I could keep going on forever and ever and ever. um But I did use our dear friend ChatGPT to come up with some really ridiculous questions that are Stargate related. That I figured we could go through a few of them as an ending thing to our episode. But before we get to that, was there anything else that you wish to discuss about what we were discussing, or is it a good point to kind of go to the questions now?
I think now is a good time to talk silly questions. Ridiculous.
Okay.
More than silly.
Okay.
They're ridiculous.
Okay. So I have quite a few here, so maybe I should choose maybe about like 5. Is that too much?
Hit me. 5 is good.
Okay. So, I'll just start with the first one.
I'm
If
afraid.
Teal'c opened a food truck, what would he serve and what would it be called?
I mean, the bad thing is what came into my mind when you said what would it be called is I thought the only thing I could think of, it would be called Indeed.
That's what I thought too. Like, do you know what the food would be? Like, what would it be that's served that would be called
That's
Indeed?
such a good question. For some reason, what pops into my head is like hot dogs, and I don't know
That's
why.
a save. You're reading my mind. This is so
What?
weird.
I have this
Literally.
image of
That's exactly. I mean, I shit you not. That's exactly what went through my mind. Immediately I saw food truck. I saw it being called, like the food itself being called Indeed, and I saw it as being like a really plain hot dog because he
Yes.
doesn't understand that like you should put things on it.
like totally plain, just Indeed, plain, Indeed.
And it's just like a really dry hot dog on a dry bun, and then he just hands it over and says Indeed.
And then
That's weird.
Someone would ask something along the lines of, where's the ketchup and mustard? And he would say something like, this is perfectly sufficient to sustain your nutritional needs or something like that. I don't know. You know what I mean? Right?
That's perfect. Yes. That's amazing. Oh my gosh. Choose a number between 2 and 15, and I'll just do whatever number you choose.
13.
13? Okay. It says, which character is most likely to have an embarrassing fanfic written about them and who wrote it? It depends what you think of as embarrassing.
There's 2 that pop into my mind.
Okay.
Daniel. I feel like Daniel. The other, I don't know why, but Shepherd. I feel like because he's so flirty and has all these kind of off-world excursions, so to speak, I feel like it would be really easy to write an embarrassing fanfic about him.
Ah. And who do you think would write it?
Daniel's? Okay, hang on. Shepherd's definitely somebody that is making fun of his excursions. Like someone working at SGA that sees Shepherd being all flirty and gets together with their friends and makes up funny stories about Shepherd.
Oh my gosh. I could imagine Keller and Teyla like getting together.
It's like, that's the 5th one this week that he's trying to like get with. Yeah, and she's from 5 planets over or something, but Daniel Jackson, somehow I feel like it would be someone that had a crush on him.
Oh yeah.
like some researcher on SG1 that they're super into his research and super into him, and then they write this really embarrassing fanfic about him going and finding the greatest artifact, and then they fall in love and everything. You know what I mean? Like,
Oh my gosh. You know, I could imagine like Jack O'Neill like being bored and like trying to find ways to like maybe he was told by like a therapist or something to start writing stories, and then like it's like this like secret pleasure of his to write this weird fanfic stuff, and then like he like writes all these weird things about Daniel, and then like the book gets found, like, and they're just like, who wrote this? Like it's like a shockaroo that it's like Jack.
That'd be
Because
really
then
funny.
like there's like things about Carter in there, and
The funny thing, I totally feel that if Jack O'Neill wrote this fan fiction, it would be really mundane.
oh,
Like it wouldn't be
probably.
going on off-world missions. It would be something ridiculous, like Carter enjoying her blue jello, and then nothing overly weird happens, but maybe like there's some interaction or like goofy but mundane weirdness. It would be so mundane situations, is what I feel like. And then it would be
That's
really
funny.
so is that who do you think would have the most fan fiction written about them? Embarrassing.
I mean, oh, maybe McKay. Like, I think like someone that it could go two ways. It could be either like a weird thing of like, you remember like the girl he was with before and they never got married, like
Mhm.
where she like writes this like steamy stuff about McKay.
Oh my God.
Or it could be like a fellow like scientist person that's just mad at him. Oh, like Zelenka like could be like mad at McKay and just like write all this weird stuff about McKay and his arrogance.
That would be so hilarious if you found out later that Zelenka had written tons and tons of sort of slanderous fan fiction.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay, so choose another number and then I will.
11.
Okay. Which Stargate villain would be the most annoying to get stuck in traffic with?
Oh no. That's a very good question.
I think Ball.
Ball, really?
Yeah, like I think like especially like if you were stuck with like a bunch of his clones, like I just feel
Oh yeah, that
like
would be
it
a
would just be really
nightmare.
annoying.
Yeah. Well, especially because he has this arrogance a little bit. And then imagine being stuck with four people in a car that all have that same arrogance. Yeah, that would be a
Yeah.
nightmare. You're right. It's definitely Ball. As much as like there's certain aspects about Ball that are really fantastic and I'd really enjoy, you know, that no.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see. Oh, this is a funny one. If Rodney McKay had to swap bodies with Daniel Jackson for 24 hours, who would cause more chaos?
Ooh.
Oh gosh, that's a difficult one.
It's a difficult one, but I'm going to pick a very logical answer to it. I'm going to
Okay.
say that Daniel would cause more chaos in Rodney McKay's body simply because what would Daniel want more than anything else? To be able to play with ancient tech. And suddenly he has a body that's capable of it in a location that's capable of it. And he could like wreak total havoc in Atlantis and find all the old labs and weird ancient tech.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Oh my gosh. I just feel like it's hard for me to decide who I really think like could cause more chaos, because I think they're both like capable of doing equal amounts of chaos depending on what they choose to do, if that makes sense. Like
Totally, totally.
but I think you're very valid on your reasoning behind it being Daniel. That's a high possibility. So I'll just agree with you on that.
We'll not quit on that one.
Yeah. That's why I was laughing when we mentioned the fanfic stuff, because that's just like weird stories, and then you mentioned Daniel Jackson. I'm just like, if only people saw our weird story on ChatGPT about us and Daniel Jackson, but
You're making it sound weird now.
Wait, no.
Now you made it sound way in a different direction than it is.
No. Not like that. Oh my God, that's too funny. Ooh, okay. Well, people's minds will wander where they wander, but it was not like that. Let's see. Should I do one more or two more questions?
Yes. Hit me.
Okay. Okay, which Goa'uld would have the most unhinged TikTok account? What would be their niche?
My mind goes to Ball.
And what would and why would that be, and what would be his niche of what he would have on TikTok?
I feel like Ball would be super obnoxious and constantly posting like shirtless thirst traps and like fashion pictures. I mean,
really?
yeah.
I imagine him having like really weird like TikTok lives where he's like torturing someone.
That too. Okay, there would be that too, but with a shirt off. Okay, like thirst trapping torture. I don't know.
Thirst trapping torture.
Thirst trapping TikTok torture.
Oh my gosh, what's the name of the Goa'uld that is oh gosh, he was from SG1 where it was earlier on, I believe, and he was General Hammond like made it that like he was like put in prison or something like that and wasn't allowed any food.
What was his name? I can't remember, but I know the gluttonous one.
Yeah, because I think he would be funny on TikTok where he would probably do like a bunch of those whatever those are called. Mukbang? I don't know what you call
he
those.
would have mukbang. Absolutely. That would be amazing. But you know what? I would actually watch that.
Oh God.
It would be far better than watching Ball and his thirst traps, no? Like I mean, if you're scrolling through Goa'uld TikToks, like who I think is not a villain, but I definitely think would be ridiculous on TikTok is Vala's dad.
Oh my gosh. I thought you were gonna say Vala because I could imagine Vala being on TikTok for sure.
Yeah, but she'd like have a cool, I feel like
Yeah,
Vala
she would
have a
be.
really cool TikTok. You
Yeah.
know, like
Yeah.
but Vala's dad, it would be all really constant scheme.
Oh yeah, because he did the weird oh, what do you call it? Like the advert things where like gosh, I'm sounding so British right now. I've been in Scotland too long. Adverts. You know, like the commercial things where like they would try and sell scams and stuff. Yeah, like oh, that's right. I forgot about him. He was a funny one.
But man, actually, I really like this concept of Goa'uld TikToks.
Yeah.
So we have like the Goa'uld fashion and the Goa'uld TikToks.
Yes.
But I definitely want to play the game of figure skating costume and decide, is it Goa'uld, Wraith, or I?
Yes, we've got to do that. We've got to do that. Okay, should I do one more question before we go?
One last question.
Okay, so which member of SG1 is most likely to have a secret knitting hobby? And then the bonus question from that would be, what do they knit?
100% Teal'c, if it's SG1. If it's Atlantis, I'd say Ronan.
I think Teal'c as well. And I don't think I can like say my answer as to what I think he would knit because like it brings me back to the days of well, it doesn't matter. Can I say like what you guys used to crochet and stuff?
I mean, I think so. It's just whether or not it will get demonetized or banned. I mean, I think you can call it a Venus.
Yeah, because that's what it was called. I could imagine Teal'c knitting Venuses. Yeah. which are shaped like what you would think they're shaped like, but they have beans inside, right? Or something like that.
And he would do it for a good cause without like he would knit them and then donate the proceeds to some kind of organizations, you know?
Yeah.
I feel
or
like
sell them at Pride. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So
That's a note to end on.